Real betrayal, female outburst, pain of betrayal, my husband's lover. These are words that usually stick in the throat like thorns. And that's exactly how this story began. An ordinary woman, with a seemingly stable life, a marriage that seemed secure, and a family like any other until the day everything turned upside down. When she discovered her husband's lover, and did something that no one could ever imagine. This is not just another story of unexpected betrayal. It is a story of love and lies, of male infidelity, of pain, shock, and yes, of a romantic twist that will leave you speechless. And as much as everything seems predictable, what she did with the other is so out of the ordinary, so unbelievable, that it is impossible not to ask yourself, would I have done the same? The protagonist of this story is a strong woman, although she herself did not know it at the beginning. Let's call her she for now, because her identity will be revealed by herself in the next part. What matters now is to understand the scenario in which it all began, and more than that, to feel the pain, the distrust, the silence that grew between her and the man with whom she shared her life. They had been married for 7 years. They had a young daughter, a routine marked by Sunday lunch at their mother-in-law's house, occasional trips, birthdays with smiling photos on Instagram. In everyone's eyes, they were a perfect couple. But there was something out of place, ... A detail that was almost invisible to those who saw it from the outside, but glaring to those who felt it firsthand. It was the distant look in their eyes. The cell phone turned upside down. The subtle change in schedules. The increasingly elaborate excuses. The hugs that began to seem empty. She felt it. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it. That feeling that she was losing something, or someone. That there was another woman in the place that used to be hers. At first, she tried to ignore it. After all, who hasn't gone through difficult times in their marriage? Life is full of ups and downs, and not every silence is a sign of betrayal. Or so she tried to convince herself, especially because he knew exactly how to calm her suspicions. An untimely gift. A momentary attention, an I love you said at the right moment. Manipulative maybe, but she didn't know that yet. She still believed it was just a phase. Until something changed, she found a hotel receipt in his wallet. A hotel that was less than 10 minutes from his work. There were no meetings scheduled that day, and he didn't even know she had access to that wallet. In fact, she didn't usually go through his things. But that day, she felt it. Something stronger than reason guided her to that paper. And there, for the first time, she knew for sure there was another woman. The ground seemed to disappear. Her legs trembled, and everything she had been trying to ignore came crashing down on her like an avalanche. The cold conversations, the delays, the way he had avoided eye contact for the past few months. None of it was for nothing. He had someone, and she needed to know who it was. In the days that followed, the pain became fuel. She didn't cry. Not yet. She investigated. She looked for clues on social media, in the messages he left unintentionally open, in his random words on the phone. She put together crumbs of information, like someone putting together a jigsaw puzzle of their own ruin. And little by little, she began to piece together the profile of his lover. A younger woman, free, no children, someone he worked with. The final piece of this puzzle was about to fit together, and it would change everything. But the most shocking thing was yet to come. Because this woman, who on the outside seemed calm and controlled, was up to something. Not a scandal, not a scene, not a fight, but a response, a gesture, a gift, something no one would have imagined. Can you imagine what a betrayed woman would do to her husband's lover? A slap, a scream, a threat, maybe. But not in this case. This story will not end the way you think. And what follows is an outburst so intimate, so human, that it will shake everything you believe about betrayal, revenge, and empathy. Now, I want to know from you, what would you do if you found out who your partner's lover was? Would you tell her? Would you make a fuss? Or would you keep quiet? Comment below what you would do in her place. And if you like real, exciting, and surprising stories, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this powerful confession.
Hello, my name is Amanda. And to this day, when I say that name out loud, it feels like something inside me breaks a little bit again. Because it took me so long to understand who I really was. That when I found out, it was too late to go back. When it all started, I was convinced that I was happy. You know that woman who believes she is building a solid family, who struggles to take care of her daughter, her husband, the house, and work? That was me. I did everything. I did my best to be a good mother, a present wife, a strong woman, and for a long time, that was enough for me. I married Davi 7 years ago. He was always very charismatic, the kind of man that all his friends praised, that his family treated like a trophy. Handsome, intelligent, friendly. I felt proud to walk beside him, and more than that, I felt safe. He always knew how to say the right things to me. Kay, that made me believe that we were a team, that we would be together forever. But forever slowly began to fade away. At first, there were silences. Those moments when he would stare into space or at his cell phone with a half smile on his face. I would ask him what was wrong, and he would answer, nothing major. Then came the delays, the excuses. Meeting with a client, problem at the office, I had to take the car to the garage, one every day. I would make a mental note, but I forced myself not to doubt, because distrusting him was like doubting the story I had chosen to live. And I didn't want to ruin everything with suspicion, till the receipt arrived. It's a small piece of paper forgotten inside his wallet. A hotel room, a daily rate, a schedule on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember looking at that piece of paper as if it were a bomb about to explode. My body froze. My hands were shaking. And I knew that that piece of paper was going to change my life. But even so, I didn't confront him right away. Took a deep breath. I put it away. I looked in the mirror. And for the first time in a long time, I saw a woman who didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't cry that day. I went after the truth. I started to observe, to study every detail. The messages he deleted, the schedules he changed. And that's how I found out. Her name was Gabriela. She worked with him. She was younger, single, without children. The opposite of my reality. I found out because he made a mistake. He left WhatsApp web open on his laptop. It was just 2 minutes of distraction, ... and I saw it. The conversations, the photos, nicknames, the promises, the lies. They had been together for months. He told her that our marriage was just a facade, that I was cold, that he stayed with me because of our daughter, that he would soon separate, that he dreamed of living with her. I read each sentence as a stab in the back. It was as if he were erasing our history with his own hands. Didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to hit, to break everything. Another part of me just wanted to disappear, to vanish, to pretend that nothing was real. But there was a third part, a silent, wounded part that began to think, to plan, to observe. I've never been one for scandals. I'm the type of person who feels everything inside, who holds back tears until I can't hold them back anymore, who writes instead of screaming. And that's why, in the following days, I didn't say anything. I continued living normally, least on the outside. He didn't suspect that I knew. He came home as if nothing had happened. He kissed our daughter, had dinner with me, slept in the same bed. I observed everything. I studied every reaction, every new lie. And that's when an idea occurred to me. I didn't want revenge, not in the way people imagine. Didn't want to reduce my pain to the level of betrayal. I wanted to understand. And more than that, I wanted to mark that story in a way that he could never erase. And that she, ... that Gabriela, ... would never forget either. It was then that I decided to write a letter. Yes, a letter. Not for him, but for her. A sincere, raw letter, written with all the weight of my pain and all the lucidity I had left. I told him everything. How we met, how he looked at me at the altar, how he reacted when he found out I was pregnant. I wrote about the happy days, the plans, the promises. But I also told him about the absences, the lies, the forced smiles. And then I talked about her, about how I discovered her, about how she came into my life without knowing it, about how she was living a lie just like me. I didn't curse, I didn't humiliate, I didn't threaten, I just showed the truth, with all the words that a broken heart can still write. I asked her to read until the end. I asked her to think. And in the end, I left a question. Do you still want to be the next one to live what I'm living now? And along with the letter, I sent a gift. It was a necklace. The same one he had given me for our 4th wedding anniversary. The same necklace he had probably complimented me on with the same words he had used on her. I took it off my neck, put it in a little box, tied it with a blue ribbon, and wrote a simple note. From woman to woman. From broken heart to deluded heart. I didn't wait for an answer, but she came. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. It's prose that day on purpose. Davi always left early on Tuesdays, said he had off-site meetings, and came back later than usual. It was the perfect window. I knew where she worked, and I knew exactly where to send it. I used an anonymous motorcycle courier, wrapped the envelope in a simple, discreet package, and wrote only her name, Gabriela. No return address, no notice. It's just the letter and the necklace. That day, I couldn't work properly. My hands were sweating. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. Not because I was afraid of what she would think, right, but because I knew that letter, that gesture, was the point of no return. Once sent, there was no going back to being the woman who pretended not to know. I was finally taking a stand, revealing myself. At the end of that night, Davi came home looking just like always. He kissed me on the cheek, asked what was for dinner, sat on the couch with his daughter, and put on the soccer game as if nothing was happening. And I just watched him. I heard every syllable with different ears. It was strange. Seemed like I was now seeing a stranger in the house. And in a way, that was exactly what it was. I spent the next 2 days in silence. I didn't know if she had read it. I didn't know if she had responded. I hadn't left any contact information, no email, nothing. Just the necklace and the raw pain of the words. But then, on Thursday night, something changed. Davi came home with a strange expression. You know when someone pretends to be normal, but their eyes are full of confusion? He kissed me quickly, asked about my daughter, but seemed nervous. He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. It was restless. I went to the kitchen to get some water, and when I came back, I found him in the bedroom, playing with my cell phone. Did you lose something? I asked firmly. He turned around immediately. He tried to hide it. No, I left my charger here. He had never done that before. Go through my phone. Never. And that was when I knew she had received it. And more than that, she had talked to him. I kept pretending. I kept my posture like I had no idea what was going on. But inside, I was on fire. And it wasn't anger. It was a kind of strength, an energy I had never felt before. Like every time he lied to me, I grew an inch inside. In the early hours of that same day while he was sleeping, his cell phone vibrated 3 times. I waited. I waited for him to take a deep breath, turn to the side, and settle down. And when I was sure he was fast asleep, I picked up his phone. I knew the password. He never imagined I remembered it. And there, for the first time, I joined the conversation between him and her. And it was like watching an empire fall. Her message was direct, raw, and surprising. You don't deserve either of them. And I won't continue to be an accomplice to that. You lied to me. David, you made me believe you were a victim, when in fact, you are the villain of the story. Amanda showed me more dignity in a letter than you did in months of empty promises. I'm returning her necklace. I hope she throws it in the trash. That was it. 4 messages, all sent within minutes of each other. No response from him. And in the next photo, a picture of the necklace I had sent. Returned. Left on a table as a symbol that she had understood everything. That she had come to her senses. Funny, I should have felt relief, right? But all I felt was emptiness. Because in that moment, I knew it wasn't about her. It was never about her. Gabriela was just a consequence. The problem was always him. It's the man who slept next to me as if nothing had happened. My daughter's father. The same man I chose. Now I needed to learn to forget. The next morning, when he woke up, he found me drinking coffee. Everything was so calm, and he knew it. He knew something had changed. He looked at me hesitantly. He sat down at the table, took a sip of his coffee, and said, "Gabriela, broke up with me." Simple as that? As if he were talking about the weather forecast. I didn't answer anything. I continued eating my bread, chewing slowly, looking out the window. And he insisted, "I think she received something. I don't know exactly." I rolled my eyes at him. For the first time in weeks, I looked at him with truth. "She got what you deserve to hear," I replied firmly. "And she had more courage than you." He froze, blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence grew thick. And then he muttered, "Did you know? I always knew. I just didn't know how far you would be capable of going." He tried to justify himself. He started saying it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that he was confused, that he still loved me, that we were a family. But the truth, David, is that true love doesn't hide in hotel rooms. Love does not lie, does not omit, does not tarnish the name of the person with whom one sleeps every night. Love doesn't break a house to live an adventure. He cried. He cried like I had never seen him. But you know what? I didn't cry along. In that moment, I felt light. For the first time in weeks, maybe even years, I felt at peace with myself because I had done what needed to be done. I had stepped out of the victim role and taken control of my own story. That night, I slept alone in our daughter's room. He slept on the sofa. The next day, I did what any wounded and conscious woman would do. I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't talk about separation yet, but I needed to understand my rights, my paths, my freedom, not for revenge, but for myself, for the Amanda I had forgotten to be. In the next part, I will tell you what it was like to face the process of deciding whether to stay or leave. Because the hardest part wasn't finding out about the betrayal. It was deciding what to do about it. I was never the kind of woman who planned her own separation. In fact, I was exactly the opposite. The kind of woman who believes that everything can be resolved through dialogue, patience, and love. For years, I struggled to make our marriage work. I swallowed frogs, ignored indifference, and closed my eyes to absences. I thought that all of this was part of building a life together, that no relationship was perfect and that imperfections could be fixed with mutual effort. But looking back now, I realize how much I struggled alone. After the conversation in which Davi confessed that Gabriela had broken up with him, the house went silent. The daughter ran through the hallways, unaware that her parents' world was falling apart. The routine continued, the bills continued to arrive, and work commitments continued. But inside me, everything had changed. I walked as if I were floating, amidst the rubble, stepping carefully so as not to cut myself. And at the same time, I tried to maintain a semblance of normality. For myself, for my daughter, and also because I still wasn't sure what to do. The lawyer was direct. He said that with everything I had, evidence, saved conversations, receipts, and even the necklace with the letter it would be easy to start a contentious separation process if I wanted. He said that I would be entitled to custody of my daughter, alimony, and whatever was due to me by law. I listened attentively, but inside, my heart was still heavy. It's not easy to end a story that's been going on for years. It's not easy to look at your daughter's father and see a traitor. There's a silent mourning that no one sees. a strange guilt for having failed even when you gave everything. And the cruelest part, there's that lonely moment when the pain stops being anger and becomes an emptiness so great that it seems to have no end. The following week, David tried to get closer. He started arriving early, making dinner and playing with his daughter more. One day he brought me flowers. The next day he wrote me a letter saying that he regretted it, that he couldn't explain why he had done it, that I was the woman of his life, and that only now, after everything, had he realized how much he loved me. I read the letter. I cried. I cried because, deep down, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe, that wished it was all just a nightmare, and that we could wake up again on our first day together before all this, before the lies, Gabriela, the pain. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be the woman who accepts crumbs anymore, who clings to promises after being torn apart by suits. One night, when our daughter was already asleep, I sat with him on the porch and said everything that was stuck in my throat. "You destroyed the person I was," I said. "And even if I wanted to, I can never be the woman who believed in you again." He was silent. He looked at the floor. His eyes were red, but I don't know if it was from regret or fear of losing. "The comfort of our home? No," he replied after a few minutes. "And I hate myself for it." That touched me. It's not enough. Over the next few days, I began sleeping in a different room. I set up a space in my office and put a single bed in there. It wasn't out of pride. It was out of self-respect. The house was big enough to keep my distance. I didn't stop him from seeing his daughter. I didn't want to keep them apart. She still thought her father was just sad because of work. I, on the other hand, spent my nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what would come next. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about my identity, about who I was now, after having lived through all that. And then, one random Saturday, something unexpected happened. I received a message on Instagram. It was from Gabriela. My heart raced. I hesitated before opening it. My hands were shaking. I thought about erasing it, pretending I hadn't seen it. But something inside me told me I had to read it. So I took a deep breath and opened it. "Hi, Amanda. I really hope this message doesn't hurt you. I just wanted to thank you for the letter, for the gift, for your courage. You had every reason in the world to hate me, and yet you chose to open my eyes. And I needed that. I don't want to justify anything. I was naive, selfish, and I was part of something that never should have happened. But you were bigger than all of that. I admire you. I really do. I hope you find the peace you deserve. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I closed my phone with tears in my eyes. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected empathy from someone who had hurt me, even indirectly. It was as if for the first time I wasn't alone. As if that pain, however absurd it was, had found an answer that gave me back some of my humanity. I didn't answer. At least, not that day. But I kept the message, because she reminded me of something important. I wasn't just a victim. I was a whole woman. And it was time to act like it. On Monday, I filed the official separation request. I called Davi to talk and told him that there was no turning back. He cried, he begged, he tried to argue. But I had already made my decision. It wasn't easy, believe me. Breaking up is one of the hardest pains anyone can face. But sometimes, it's the only way to stay alive inside. In the next part, I will tell you what it was like to face society, family, and judgments. Because separation, for many, still sounds like failure. But for me, this was the first step towards freedom. After officially filing for separation, I prepared myself to face something that I knew would be almost as painful as the betrayal, the judgment of the people around me. Because in the society we live in, a woman who decides to end a marriage, even if it is for legitimate and painful reasons, is often seen as guilty or responsible for the failure. The very first day after the announcement, my mother called me crying. With that trembling voice, she asked if I was sure of what I was doing, if this was the best decision for me and my daughter. My father, more harshly, said that I needed to try to save the marriage, that the betrayal was a temporary mistake, and that everything could be resolved through dialogue. My friends started to look at me differently. Some tried to be neutral, but the words hidden between there. Smiles made it clear what they were thinking. Others simply walked away, perhaps out of fear of scandal or because they didn't know how to deal with the situation. Even at work, I felt the weight of the stares and whispered comments. It was as if I had become a betrayed woman and that this was a label I would carry forever. The pain of betrayal seemed to be heightened by this social invisibility, as if it were forbidden to feel anger, sadness, or even to wish to be happy again. Deep down, I knew I needed to be stronger. For myself and for my daughter. I couldn't let other people's judgments define who I was or how I would live from now on. It was at that moment that I decided to seek professional help. I started going to therapy sessions where I could finally open my heart without fear of being judged. There, I learned to understand that the betrayal was not my fault, that my worth did not depend on what David did, and that I deserved love and respect first from myself. In therapy, I wrote letters that I would never send. I poured out everything. I had been holding in anger, sadness, fear, feelings of abandonment. I discovered that in order to rebuild my world, I first needed to rebuild myself. Meanwhile, David tried to keep in touch. He called, sent messages, showed up at my door asking to talk. I, however, was closing cycles. He was still the father of my daughter, and no one could erase that. But he was no longer the man I wanted to share my life with. One of the most memorable moments of this phase was when our daughter, aged 5, asked me, "Mom, is Dad going to come back to live with us?" I took a deep breath, looked into those bright eyes full of hope, and replied, "Daddy will always be with us, my love. But now he's going to live in another house. That doesn't change the love he feels for you. Okay?" She nodded, but I could see a hint of sadness in her eyes. I realized then that in addition to my own pain, I also needed to take care of hers, and that being a mother was my greatest purpose now. I began to dedicate myself even more to my work, my routine, and my daughter. I rediscovered small pleasures: the smell of coffee in the morning, walks in the park, her sincere laughter. It was a slow process, but I was learning to be happy again, in a different way. And then something happened that no one could have predicted. In one of these therapy sessions, my psychologist asked me if I had ever thought about forgiving Davi, forgiving Gabriela, and most importantly, forgiving myself. That fell like a bombshell. Forgive after everything. I confess that, in truth, I still felt a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. But that perhaps forgiving didn't mean forgetting, but rather letting go. From then on, I began to work on this concept, to perfect my ability to accept that, no matter how painful it was, the past could not define my future. In the midst of all this transformation, I received another message from Gabriela. This time she wrote, "Amanda, I know there's still a lot to resolve, but I want you to know that I'm trying to change. Not just for myself, but because I don't want to be part of anyone else's pain anymore. I hope that one day we can look back on all of this with less bitterness." I confess that those words touched me. They touched me because, deep down, I know that her pain is also real, even if it was caused by bad choices. Maybe at that moment, I understood that the truest revenge is not to cause pain, but to rebuild yourself, to free yourself. Now I walk a road of reconstruction. The road is not straight, it has curves, stones, and uncertainties, but it is my road. There is still the shadow of the past, of course, but I refuse to let it dominate my present. And this is the truth. I want to share with you the greatest power a betrayed woman can have is not in punishing, humiliating, or taking revenge. It is in choosing self-love above all else. Because, in the end, what no one imagined I would give to the other was exactly that, the freedom so that she could also learn, grow, and perhaps, one day, regret. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll find another love. Maybe I'll remain alone, but one thing I know, I will never again allow myself to be reduced to my pain. The months passed and I felt like I was rebuilding myself, little by little. Like someone putting pieces of glass together to make a new mosaic, a better, stronger, more whole version of myself. The pain of the betrayal didn't go away. Of course, it was still there, like a scar that reminds me of a difficult past, but that doesn't define who I am. David was still present in our daughter's life, but the distance between us was only growing. He tried to get closer, but I had already learned to be firm. It wasn't that I didn't miss the man I once loved, did Kai? But that version of him no longer existed, or maybe it never really existed. What was left was a man who didn't have the courage to face the consequences of his own actions. In the midst of all this, my relationship with Gabriela also took an unexpected turn. After those messages she sent me, I didn't really know what to expect. For months, we avoided direct contact, maintaining a respectful distance out of respect. For myself, mainly. However, something inside me told me that I couldn't let the matter drop there. It was on an autumn afternoon that I decided to send her a message, something simple, direct. We can talk. To my surprise, she responded quickly. We arranged to meet at a discreet cafe far from the neighborhood where we lived, away from prying eyes. I arrived first, nervous, feeling a strange mix of fear, anger, and an almost inexplicable desire to understand this woman who, in a way, had invaded my life. When Gabriela arrived, she came with a shy smile, a look that carried sadness and a weight that I recognized immediately, the weight of guilt. We sat down, and silence reigned for a few seconds until she spoke. Thank you for calling me. I needed this. The conversation was not easy. She spoke of her insecurities, her mistakes, the choices she had made that she knew had led her down the wrong path. I spoke of the pain, the feeling of loss, the anger. There were no accusations, at least not explicit ones, but there was honesty. She told me that when she received my letter, she was shocked at first. She had never thought that a betrayed woman could act that way, with dignity and empathy. I explained that it wasn't about her, that I always knew that the real problem was with Davi, and there, in that cafe, in the midst of difficult conversations, there was a moment of connection. Not of friendship, not of complete forgiveness. We were still far from that, but of mutual recognition of the pain we both felt. I left there with mixed feelings. On the one hand, a lightness that I hadn't felt in months. On the other, the certainty that this encounter wouldn't change everything overnight, was just another step on the long road to recovery. Meanwhile, in my daily life, I continued to strengthen myself. I sought out hobbies that helped me relax. I started writing against poetry. I found comfort in the little things, like a walk in the park or a heart-to-heart talk with a friend. My daughter was growing up happy, and I made sure to protect that smile of hers. To teach her that even when the world seems to be falling apart, there is always a light to follow. David tried to reestablish a closer relationship with us a few times, but I no longer allowed him to cross the barrier I had erected. Not out of resentment, but because I needed to protect myself. I learned that self-love is not selfishness. It is necessity. And then the unexpected invitation came. Gabriela invited me to a charity event she was organizing. It was a cause that was close to my heart, helping women who are victims of domestic violence and abuse. She wanted me to be one of the speakers to tell my story and thus help other women feel strong enough to face their own battles. I hesitated. Should I expose myself publicly? Should I tell strangers everything I had experienced? On the other hand, I knew that my story could save lives. I accepted. At that event, in front of dozens of women, I spoke with an open heart about betrayal, pain, overcoming, and self-love. Applause came, tears came, hugs came. There I felt that I had transformed my pain into real strength. And what no one imagined, not even myself, is that that moment would mark the beginning of a profound change, not only in me, but also in Gabriela, and in a certain way in Davi. They listened to my speech. They felt, perhaps for the first time, the weight of what they had caused. And I, standing before them, realized that forgiveness, not necessarily reconciliation, was the path to my emotional freedom. This story is not about heroes or villains. It is about women who, even when hurt, choose to move forward stronger, more aware, and I am one of them. What about you? Have you ever had to deal with a situation that seemed hopeless and found the strength to start over? I really want to hear your story. After that charity event, something inside me began to change, in a deeper way than I could have imagined. It was more than just talking to other women. It was as if in that moment, I had truly found myself again, not the woman I was before the betrayal, nor the woman who had spent months in pain, but a new woman made from my own ashes. Gabriela and I, despite everything we had been through, began to walk in an unexpected direction. Our contact continued with difficult conversations, full of moments when resentment almost took over, but also others in which mutual respect emerged. We were not friends. I never imagined that would be possible, but a kind of silent alliance, an acknowledgement of the pain we both carried. She told me in one of these conversations that her life was also far from what she had dreamed of. That guilt was eating away at her, that she had lost friends, confidence in her work, and most importantly, her own dignity. That affected me. Because even though I had reasons to hate her, I saw there not an enemy, but a broken woman trying to get back on her feet while all this was happening. David, the man I had once loved, seemed to be losing himself even more in the chaos he had created. His arrogance gave way to a melancholy silence. He was no longer the man who threatened and lied, but a being who seemed to be drowning in his own guilt and regret. He tried to apologize. He tried to recover what he had lost, but it was too late. I had already become someone who could no longer be fooled by empty words. Our relationship was limited to our daughter, and even then I kept the necessary distance to protect myself. He was no longer my partner, but he was still my daughter's father, and I knew that this required me to constantly balance love and protection. During this period, I met Lucas again, who was an old friend, someone who had always been there from afar, and who now reappeared in my life as a balm for my wounds. He didn't come as a savior, nor as a substitute for the pain I was carrying, but as a friend who, with patience and affection, helped me rediscover what trust, respect, and true love were. Lucas didn't ask me for anything. He didn't make demands. He was just there, present. And little by little, what was friendship became something more, a light and healthy feeling, which taught me that it was possible to love without fear, without pain, without betrayal. David realized this, and it wasn't easy. There were moments of tension between us, some arguments, and even an uncomfortable meeting where words were harsh. But I held firm to what I had learned. My daughter's well-being was my priority, and anything that could interfere with that, I would have to deal with firmly. Being a mother in this situation was a daily challenge. My daughter felt the changes, even though we tried to protect her innocence. I tried hard to give her a stable routine, full of love and affection, so that she would grow up knowing that, despite the difficulties, she could trust me. The healing process was not linear. Some days I felt stronger, and other days the pain returned with intensity. Sometimes I found myself thinking about everything I had lost, about everything that could have been different. But over time, I learned to embrace these feelings without letting them overwhelm me. There were days when I missed Davi so much, not the man he was after the betrayal, but the man I once loved, the good times we had. I confess that it was a constant internal conflict, but I never went back on my decision to move on. With Lucas by my side, I learned that happiness is not the absence of pain, but the ability to live in spite of it. That true love is not the one that hurts, but the one that heals. In the midst of all this, one episode left a deep impression on me. One day, when I was picking up my daughter from school, I met Gabriela at the exit. For a moment, we stood face to face without words, just an intense look that said everything we didn't need to say. It was a moment of silent recognition of the journey we were both on. Later, we talked by text message, and she confessed to me that she never imagined I would be capable of so much dignity and strength. That my gesture of sending the letter and the necklace, instead of hatred, had awakened in her a deep reflection. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her completely, but I knew that holding a grudge would only hurt me. Forgiveness to me was a gift to myself, not to others. Our relationship, even though distant, became something I called respect for shared pain. Two wounded women trying to rebuild their lives in the best way possible. In the end, I discovered that the greatest victory was not taking David down or punishing him for what he did. It was freeing myself from the role of victim and taking control of my own story. Today, I am a different woman, stronger, more aware, more whole. Not because I forgot the betrayal, but because I decided that I will not let it define me. That turbulent year drew to a close. Life seemed to be presenting me with a new chapter, one I never would have imagined when I discovered David's betrayal. After months of suffering, tears, and sleepless nights, I finally felt like I had found a way to move forward without carrying the weight of the past. My daughter was growing up full of life and hope, and I was proud to be raising an example of courage and resilience in her. Every smile she gave me was a victory over everything I had experienced. And I made sure to show her that even when the world seems to be falling apart, it is possible to rebuild. Gabriela and I continued to maintain a distant but respectful relationship. She had also distanced herself from Davi, and her journey of seeking redemption seemed sincere. We weren't friends, but we had something that transcended hatred, an understanding of the pain we both carried. Lucas was by my side, firm and constant. He was not only my companion, but also my greatest support during this rebuilding phase. With him, I learned that love can be gentle and safe, without demands, without betrayal. But not everything was resolved. There was something inside me that still needed to be faced. Something that wouldn't let me sleep peacefully. How I would deal with the past, with the image others had of me, with the shadow of that betrayal that somehow still haunted me. That's when I made a decision that many would consider controversial. I decided to organize a meeting. It's a meeting between me, Davi, and Gabriela. It's a meeting to close that chapter once and for all, so that we could together end the cycle and, who knows, go our separate ways without resentment, or at least with less pain. When I told Lucas about this, he was surprised, maybe even scared. But he supported me. He knew this was a necessity for me, a step towards my emotional freedom. I invited Gabriela first. She accepted without hesitation, showing that she was ready to face her past. Later, I spoke to Davi, who took a little longer to agree, but ended up accepting, perhaps because of the weight of guilt or simply because he knew he needed to face the consequences. We arranged to meet in a neutral place, a small cafe where no one knew us, so we could talk without judgment. On the appointed day, I arrived early. My heart was beating fast, a mixture of anxiety and hope. I wanted that moment to be real, that it could bring peace. When Davi and Gabriela arrived, the atmosphere was tense, full of pent-up emotions. I began speaking with a firm voice, but full of emotion. We are not here to reopen wounds, but to close them, so that each of us can move forward with dignity. Davi looked at me, his eyes full of regret, while Gabriela kept a serious, almost emotional look. We talked about what had happened, about the consequences of our choices, about the pain and the losses. It wasn't easy. We cried, we argued, but we also listened. For the first time, I felt like we were being honest with each other, without masks, without lies. In the end, I did something no one expected. I handed Gabriela a small package. It was the necklace I had written about in the letter, symbol of what I felt and what I wanted to convey: forgiveness and freedom. I told her it wasn't a gift of friendship, but a symbol that, despite everything, I chose to move on without resentment. That the necklace represented the end of the pain that had brought us together and the beginning of a future where neither of us would be victims of the past. David remained silent, seeming to understand the magnitude of the gesture. From that day on, everything changed for me. I felt like I had finally truly freed myself. I'm not saying that forgiving was easy or that I forgot what happened. No. But I chose that my life was worth more than the pain. And that choice gave me peace. Getting this far, telling everything I've experienced, still seems like a challenge to me. Revisiting every moment of betrayal, pain, and humiliation, and still being able to speak with an open heart. Proof of the strength I've acquired. A strength that, for a long time, I thought I didn't have. Along the way, I learned that betrayal is not just an act of disloyalty between two people. It reverberates in the soul of the betrayed, spreading seeds of doubt, fear, and insecurity. It destroys homes, dreams, and expectations, often leaves us at the mercy of contradictory feelings. Love and hate, longing and anger, the desire to fight and to give up. I, Amanda, am no exception to this. I am simply a woman who had the courage to look at this pain, face it head on, and decide that I would not be held hostage by it forever. When I found out that Davi had cheated on me with Gabriela, my world fell apart. My certainties, my plans, what I thought was true love, everything turned to dust in seconds. The shock was so great that my mind refused to accept that reality. I wanted to believe that it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything other than pure and simple betrayal. But the truth was there, wide open, and I had to face it. Not as a victim, but as someone who needed to act. That's when I started writing my story part by part, without hiding anything. From the initial suspicion to the moment I decided to give Gabriela something no one expected. Forgiveness? Yes, forgiveness. A gesture that many consider impossible. An act that defies pride, pain, and the sense of justice. But for me, it was the key to freeing my soul. It wasn't easy to forgive, nor will it ever be. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor accepting betrayal as something normal. Forgiving means choosing not to carry the weight of resentment forever. It means allowing yourself to move forward without letting yourself be destroyed by bitterness. For months, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. I went through phases of intense anger, deep sadness, fear of the future. I cried alone, screamed against the walls, questioned my strength. But little by little, I was rebuilding my self-love and my self-esteem. The support of my daughter, the friends who stayed, and especially the therapy, were essential for this reconstruction. I discovered that self-love is the pillar that sustains our entire emotional life. The meeting I organized with Davi and Gabriela was a milestone. In that coffee, we had no illusions of reconciliation nor attempts to justify mistakes. We had raw honesty, shared tears, and, most importantly, the beginning of the end of those open wounds. Giving the necklace to Gabriela was a powerful symbol, a sign that, despite the pain, I was determined not to let the past hold me back. David, on the other hand, was more silent than ever. There were no words of public repentance, but I felt that he understood the magnitude of the loss. The loss of the love we once had, of the trust he broke, and of the woman who, despite everything, did not give up on herself. Over time, I rebuilt my life, met Lucas, and experienced a new love. A love based on sincerity, respect, and lightness. A love that reminded me that it is possible to start over, even after the worst. I know that not everyone will understand my choice to forgive. Some may even judge me, thinking that I should have acted with more resentment, more harshness. But The truth is that forgiveness is not for others. It is for ourselves. It is an act of courage, of self-love, which frees the soul and makes room for happiness. And here I am, Amanda, no longer defined by betrayal, but by my ability to pick myself up and move on. Now, I leave you, who follows this story, with a question that I carry in my heart. When pain knocks on your door, what will you do? Will you? Allow it to destroy you, or will you find the strength to transform suffering into learning? I would love to hear your response. Your comment may help not only you, but many others who are facing the same silent battle. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more real, intense, and exciting stories. Remember, life is made of choices, and the biggest one is choosing to be happy, regardless of the past. Thank you for being with me this far.